Okay. Okay, we're going to briefly talk through this. And there's a lot of things happening. Let's see, is this the right one? No, this is not the right one. Give me a second, guys. I apologize. Here we go. Okay, let me back up again. So we're going to be looking at conditionals and loops today in JavaScript, and we're going to be integrating that a little bit back into our HTML to show you how you could receive user input and then output it back out again. But before we do that, I want to make sure that everyone's aware of what's happening over the next couple of weeks. As you know, we were surprised with not having class this last Tuesday. This was a last-minute decision on behalf of the college. It didn't really affect us that much because we're coming down to the last bit of materials to be covered in this class. So today we are going to be looking at conditional logic and loops. There's going to be a brief homework assignment and the discussion forum, which is normally due by Wednesday. The discussion forum that is out there will not be due the initial posting until Friday night and the follow-up by Sunday night, okay? So just make sure you keep that in mind, that your discussion forum that was due normally on Wednesday is now shifted to Friday because of the change in the layout of this week. With that in mind, most of you should be closing in and finishing up now on your projects. Next week, on November 15th, your projects are due, the end of next week. There is a huge document that talks through all of the different features that you have to include in it. And I expect that every bit of those features will be included. That's part of the grading criteria to show that you have understood everything. Again, the project will be due on November 15th. Now, with that in mind, next week on Tuesday, we're going to be covering a little bit more JavaScript. My intent next week is to get you guys initiated to the jQuery library, and we'll demonstrate how to use that on the page. So far, everything we've been doing with JavaScript has been using the document.getElement and reading the value or the inner HTML. And with the jQuery API, we can shorten a lot of that, and it really makes it a lot easier and much funner to work with. All right, so that is Tuesday next week. Thursday next week, we're going to be looking at chapters 20 and 21. These are very, very short chapters. So honestly, we could probably knock them out in 30 minutes and be done. But we're going to do that on Thursday next week. The week of November 16th to the 22nd, this is when the course project presentations are going to be done in class. So remember that on the 15th, your projects are due, but then on the 17th and the 19th, each of you will be demonstrating to the rest of the class. There's a number of elements you need to be able to talk through to explain what you did on each page of your website, the design decisions, who your target audience is, and what things that you ran into were problems, how you overcame them, and so forth. And I'll be giving you that, that checklist for your presentation coming up. The presentation is the second half of your grade for the actual project. Now the project itself, you got to go through and do all of the elements. This is a very big part of your grade for this class. But the presentation is the other side of it, because you guys, I want you to be excited about demonstrating what you've done and what you've learned and what you're able to produce. All right, following that, the week after November 20, the week after the 22nd, this is the 23rd through the 27th, I believe. We'll have class on that Tuesday, and then Thursday is Thanksgiving. So on Tuesday, we're going to start our first bit of our final exam review. And then for Thursday, we're going to dismiss, obviously, because we won't have class then. The following week of December, let's see, the 2nd, let me pull up my calendar real quick. The first week of December, we'll meet on the 1st and the 4th. That will be the wrap up of our final exam review. And then there is no class on the 8th, but your final exam is on the 10th. So even though we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks out yet, everything is going to fly in these last 5 weeks. So I want you guys to be prepared. I know you also have a lot going on with your other classes. So this is why the first week of December, as well as the 24th of November, we're going to be using the time for final exam review, because I know you guys are going to be busy with other classes studying as well. All right, let's talk about your presentation. So remember, you're going to be presenting your site. Should only take up to 15 minutes. There are quite a few things I want you to talk through, so you'll probably use every bit of those 15 minutes. Be prepared to talk through your design choices, why you chose the particular design you did, what APIs you might or might not have used. Be prepared to talk about the purpose of your site, okay? Go into detail, talk about what this site is about. And then, of course, we're going to be having questions from the class. And I know some of you may not want to ask questions because you guys are normally pretty quiet. But I encourage you, ask questions, okay? Put the other person not on the hot seat, but, you know, ask them questions about how they did something technical, how they accomplished it, okay? Who's the site designed for, and what key problems that you ran into and how you overcame them. All right, any questions so far? No questions? All right, let's go ahead and look at the what we're going to be doing here. So guys, I want to encourage you, please follow along. As you know, the video recordings have not been working out too well. And so if you're not following along and you're just depending on those video recordings, that's not a good thing. So please make sure you're following along, capturing notes, creating your own repository of information, and not just depending on these recordings. All right, so JavaScript conditionals. A conditional statement, they help you perform different actions based on different reasons or decisions, right? We all make conditional decision statements in our life every day. You decide whether or not you want to go to McDonald's or not. And when you get there, do you want this or that or something else? Do you want it supersized, or do you want the apple pie or whatever, right? You're making decisions all the time. In JavaScript, we really want to kind of distill this decision-making process down to the simplest, as simple as we can get it. So a decision in any language, in fact, is a choice made based on Boolean logic. That means it has to evaluate to either true or false. So let's say that in your bank account you have, say, $500 and you want to buy a new computer. And someone's selling this computer and it is $501, right? Think about how you would construct a Boolean logic statement. My bank account is less than the cost of this PC. How would that evaluate? Well, my bank account is 500. The PC cost is 501, so that would evaluate to false, right? So I want you to think about the following pseudocode here. If the pot is too hot, then I need to use a mitten. If the pot is too hot. The statement is too hot is a true or false statement, right? It can either be hot or too hot. If it meets that criteria, then it's true. And if it's true, then you fall into the code block. In this instance, the code block is then I need to use a mitten. So if it's true, then I use a mitten. If false, then I don't use the mitten. All right? So look at the JavaScript conditional statements like this. So we use an if to specify a block of code to be executed if a specified condition is true. We use the else to specify a block of code to be executed if the same condition is false. We use an else if to specify a new condition to test if the first condition is false. That means up here, if we have if my bank account is less than or is greater than the PC cost, it would fall into the first code block. Else if the next code block, you would have some other condition. We also use a special type of JavaScript conditional called a switch. And if else, and switch are also all available in Java. So if you guys are on this path to next year taking Java, you're going to see some of this syntax again. Okay. So let's look at some samples of the if statement. Here's the syntax. If the condition, and the condition here is wrapped in parentheses. If the condition is true, then this is the code block. It's inside the curly brackets. This code block will be executed. So the condition must evaluate to true for the code block to execute. Okay? So consider the following code below. I have a variable I have typed out called greeting that equals good morning. If the hour of the day, the current time of the day, is less than 17, the greeting will be good day. And then I'm spitting that information out to an alert and giving the greeting, right? So it's very basic code. The conditional statement allows you to control logic functions and flow of the application. You can embed a function call inside this code block. Whereas if a certain hour of the day is, if the hour of the day is less than 17, you can have a function call that does something. Okay, and this is very typical of JavaScript to have these types of calling statements. All right, so the other type of conditionals is the else statement. The else statement follows the if condition. So we have the if condition. If it's true, it executes the code block. Otherwise, else, we're going to execute an alternative code block, right? So consider this example. We have var greeting is good morning. If the hour of the day is less than 17, we're going to say greeting is good day. Else, if the greeting equals good evening, else the greeting will equal good evening, right? So if it's not less than 17, meaning that it's 17 or over, we're going to say good evening, right? And then we're spitting out the message again to the alert statement. Okay, any questions so far from you all?
No.
Okay. Let's go ahead and look at another type of conditional. This is the else if. The else if. So again, we have the if condition is true. We have the code block that's executed. And then the next statement is, if this is not true, then is this statement true? If this statement is true, then we're going to execute that statement. Otherwise, we're going to fall down to this last statement. So this gives you the ability then, with this code block, to look at 3 different options for handling a code base. Is the student's eyes brown? Are the student's eyes blue? Otherwise, they're not brown or blue, right? But this also brings us into discussion of something else, and this is called the switch statement. Now, let me go back here. This else if condition with another else if, we could tag another else if here and go on down to another else if and another else if and another else if. We can make it one big long statement. But really, if you're going to do that, then you might want to consider using what's called the switch statement. The switch statement makes it a little bit cleaner and easier to understand. All right, so here's how the switch statement works. In the switch statement, you have the keyword switch. In parentheses, you have the expression. So whatever the expression is, the expression could be simply a value. It could be the number 1. It's whatever that value is. Typically, the expression is a parameter that's passed in that holds a value. So if you have a function that passes in a particular variable, you could look at that expression and say, you know, hey, I have the expression of 1 plus x, and whatever x is, it now gives me that new value. Let's just say x is 10. Well, the value inside that expression then would be 11. And what happens is these case statements then evaluate whatever the expression is. So typically you would have, if it's 11, you would have case 11, and then you would have the code block, and then a break statement, and then a new case statement, and so forth. All right. Now, with that in mind, think about how this works. The switch expression is evaluated only one time, meaning this piece of code right here at the top where it says switch expression. That is only evaluated once. The rest of the evaluation occurs at each case statement. So the value of the expression is compared with the value of each case. And if it's found to be true that the value matches, then the associated code block is executed. So you don't have to have anything in a code block. You could just have a break statement, because that's still a valid statement. Now, considering that the break statement is here, when you have a break and you're executing the code in this code block, when the break is called, it exits out of the switch, meaning the code execution would go all the way down to the bottom of the switch to the next line of code that is to be executed. When you do not have a case that matches, this is where the default falls into play. Now, you don't have to have a default, but it's a good idea to. because if none of these cases match, then this is where default would be. Default is the same as the else in the if statements. It's the final option for code to be run, okay? All right, let's look at a sample of this a switch statement. So here we have a function called display choice, and the parameter is choice. We have a variable being created called choice message, and the choice is passed in, and choice must be an integer, by the way, in this situation. So choice, if choice is 0, the choice message is you've chosen wisely. Call the break, and it exits out. Otherwise, if the choice that you passed in was 1, you could say this: you have chosen unwisely. Notice that the value here is assigned to the variable choice message. And we break and then have the default and some other code block, right? And we're basically then, in this example, I'm basically taking a document, get element by ID, and there's some element out there called the knight's voice, and I'm assigning to it the choice message, right? You have chosen wisely. You have chosen unwisely. So this is a typical example. Now, the other thing about the switch statement, let me go back. We'll hit this again in a moment, but I mentioned this a moment ago. The other thing about this switch statement is that the type of the parameter must match the type of the case. So what is the type of this case here?
Integer.
Right, it's an integer, but in JavaScript it's just a number, right? If you're doing other programming languages, you would possibly say integer. So it's just a number. Now choice, that means that choice must be a number as well. And this tells you something about how this evaluation occurs. It tells you that it evaluates in a strict sense, not just an equals sense. Say, for example, that choice, the value passed in, was in quotes 0. Would it match case 0? What do you think? Would choice, if the parameter passed in was of type string, in quotes, the number 0, would it match the case 0? Or would it go down to the default code block?
Would it go down to the default code block just because they're like, since it's different, since the 0 the person inputted was a string and this one's different?
Exactly. When a switch case expression is ran, it evaluates on 2 criteria. It evaluates on the value and the type. And so the type, first and foremost, must match the same type as the case. If it doesn't, then the code will fall through and go down to the default. The second, of course, is matching on value. So even though we may think that 0 in quotes is the same as 0 without quotes, it's not. They're not the same. They're not identical. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about the break statements in this code. So the break keyword is used to break out of the switch statement. Now, I talked about that a few moments ago. When you enter a case and it matches the criteria on type and value, it's a good idea to always include a break statement. The reason is that if you do not, the value matching that particular code, that case, it'll finish there and it'll go on down to the next case. and try to do a match. And if there, for some reason there's also a match there, it will also execute the code block. Now this is just the standard way that it's written. It's done this way so it gives you the flexibility, so you could have multiple cases that match the criteria, or you could only highlight on the first instance and break out of it. Now, the break keyword, it essentially stops the execution at that point and jumps out to the very last case statement. And as I mentioned before, it's not necessary to use a break in any of these, but if you omit the break statement, that next case will be executed, even if the evaluation doesn't match the case. And there can be some unintended side effects with that, especially with the default. If you have a default in there and you don't have a break on your case, it will exit out of your case and go all the way down and execute the code in the default. And you might be left scratching your head going, what's going on here? Why is the value different when it should only be? It's because you didn't have the break in there. All right. The default keyword is used to specify the code block to be run when there is no case. I just mentioned this. If you don't put a break in one of the cases and it hits that one, it's going to go ahead and fall through down to that default condition. The default keyword does not have to be the last statement, but it makes your code more readable if you do. Now, let me put this up here for you. If the default keyword is placed at the top, ensure that you use a break statement. Ensure that you have a break statement in your code, because you don't want it to continue to pass all the way through. That's one extra execution time and it makes your code run slower. All right. Let's talk about some common code blocks here. Consider this example. We have the new date get day method. This is the expression, and the get day will return whatever today is. So in JavaScript, the days of the week are defined by 0 through 6. I know that just threw your mind for a loop. So Sunday is 0, Monday is 1, Tuesday, all the way up to Saturday. And Saturday becomes day 6. They do this because it's based on the array length or array indice principle. So look at the code here, thinking about this, what it says. New date, get day. So today is what? Today is Thursday, so it would be Sunday is 0, Monday 1, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So today is 5, right? So we notice here that it's going to first hit at case 5, and the text is being assigned here, soon it is weekend. And then we break out, right? But you notice that not all of these values are populated. That's because they're just considered fall throughs. So it hits case 4, it doesn't match. It goes on down to case 5, it doesn't match. Goes on to 6, 0, 6, and so forth. But let's think about this. What if it was Wednesday? It would hit case 4, and there is no code block to be executed, and there is no break statement either. So where is it going to go? It's automatically going to go to the next one, case 5. It doesn't match. Case 0 doesn't match. Case 6, and then it'll go down to the default, looking forward to the weekend. Right? Okay. So let's look at this code here. And and think about what might happen. So if multiple cases match, only the first case is selected unless you do not have a break. So if for some reason case 0 is listed twice, it would hit case 0 the first time, and if there is no break, it would go down and hit case 0 again and call that piece of code, right? But it always calls the first in the list. This is what I was talking about earlier when we're evaluating by type and value. In JavaScript, when you're doing a equality statement, typically you use just a double equal. Using a double equal says I only want to compare the value. And we often only use double equals because we are just assuming that the values that we're writing will be of the same type. However, when you want to evaluate and make sure that there is no opportunity for error in your evaluation, that's where you use the triple equal sign. So double equal sign only evaluates for value, triple evaluates for type and value, okay? Now, in this case, the values must match the types. The values must match and the types must match. So here we have what I talked about a moment ago. Var x equals 0. We have a switch statement. This is the expression x being passed in. And we have case 0. And we've already discussed what's going to happen here. The code is going to fall out and go down to the default at the bottom. Because 0 in quotes does not match type and case, type and value for the case 0. It's implicitly using the triple equal sign. Okay. We're going to get into loops. So I'm going to break out from the presentation for a second, and we're going to open up Atom for a moment. We're going to create a new file, and I'm going to call this, let's see, JavaScript Conditionals.html. I'd like you all to follow along with me on this. And let's see here. I'm going to open this file. Inside of our code base down here, we're going to just create a script tag. And we're going to work through some samples, okay? So I want you to please make sure you're following along with me. And if I'm going too fast, just shout out and let me know. All right. So you're going to create just a simple HTML, JavaScript _conditionals.html. Let Atom, the text reader here, go ahead and create for you the majority of your HTML statement. All right, down here in our code block, we're going to use a simple script called document.write. And with document.write, we'll just refresh. Let's see, hang on one second. There we go. And as you can see with document.write, when I refresh using JavaScript, it overwrites the content. Now, we talked about this a little bit before. If I put in an H1 statement and said, hello, class, and save that, and I refresh it, what you're going to notice is that it does that. Okay. So we have hello class and that piece. Refresh it again and so forth. All right. This works only in this situation because if document.write is called after the page is loaded, it'll overwrite. Okay, let me give you an example, just so we're clear on this. Let's just say on hover, is it hover? On mouse over. We're going to talk about on hover next week. It's a jQuery wrapper method for the event. And down here, we're just going to type function change text. And all I'm going to do is wrap that piece of code there inside the function call. Okay. Now, if I save that, change text, what you're going to notice is that it goes away. But what happens when I hover? Did you see that? It automatically replaces the entire text that was there. And if we zoom in on it on the body, it's gone. Let me refresh it again. So there's hello class. You can see the body here. As soon as I hover, it overwrites it. That's what document.write does. So you only want to use document.write when you're trying to load things in advance on the page, but not necessarily after the fact. After the fact, you want to use something different. And we'll go ahead and demonstrate that now. I'll just create a div, and we'll give this div an ID and text to be changed. And instead, we'll say document get element by ID. And I am lazy, so I'm just going to copy this, paste it in, enter HTML. Well, we'll do it like this, X, because that's what we wanted to appear last time. So now if I do that and I hover over it, you can see that it appends it, right? And you could do all kinds of interesting things here. For example, you could say var value of div equals that, semicolon after it. And then I could just do something like this, value of div plus X. Save that, come up here and refresh it. And now every time I hover, it's just adding X's, right? All right, so this is using the document.getElementById inner HTML. Hopefully you guys spent some time reviewing those videos from a couple of weeks ago that I asked you to look at that talks about some of the basics of this. But what I want to demonstrate here is just basic if-then statements, because we've been looking at conditional logic. So let's create a new function. We'll call this check age. And I'm going to pass in an ID here. I'm going to say document get element by ID, ID, and we're going to be using a input box. So with an input box, we don't use We don't use the inner HTML, we use the value because it's different. So we'll come up here. We're going to just create an input. And I have an ID. And my ID is going to be what? What is my ID going to be? My age. And what I want to do is let's see, on blur, which means when my mouse leaves or when the cursor leaves the input, we want to call the function. And the function we're going to call is check age. And we're going to go ahead and pass in the ID, my age, right? Okay, let's refresh this a little bit. We got an input, type something on blur, something should be happening. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and introduce you guys to one other piece of cool technology that's available through Chrome, and this is called the debugger. Have I demoed the debugger to you guys before? If y'all use the debugger, this is gonna be your best friend, believe me, because you're gonna wonder what's going on, and the debugger is actually the best way to do this. In order to turn on the debugger, the first thing you need to do is go over to sources, and you have to have the source file. So in this instance, my source file is an HTML file, and that's fine, because as long as there is some JavaScript code in it, we can debug on it. So you click on that code, then you find the location over here on the number line where you want to create a breakpoint. A breakpoint is nothing more than just causing a pause in the code execution. So if you click on it in in Chrome, it creates this blue arrow type thing. Okay. Now, what I want to show you is when I click on this and then click out. Well, let me refresh it. So I type in here and then I click out. Is my code working? Oh, got an error. Change text. Yeah, let's pause. My function call here of check error was never being called. Do you know why? The reason it was not being called is there was an error with this, change text. And unfortunately, this is the way it works with JavaScript programming. Once there's one JavaScript error on the page, the rest of the JavaScript code will fail. So you have to isolate the first error, and you can see that the error here in the console was change text is not defined. That's because we deleted it. So easy way to take care of that is take out the on mouse over, because I don't have the change text down here anymore. I have a check age. All right. So we'll refresh this, go back to our sources. I'm going to type some text, click out. And I have another error, unexpected end of input. Well, what you do is you click on it, and it'll take you to the location where this is at. All right. And here's my problem. I'm using double quotes within double quotes. There we go. The interpreter sees the extra quotes and it thinks the end of the line is there, so it doesn't know what to do with it. Refresh it again, go to the console, everything looks good. We're back on the debugger on the source, type in some code, click off. Now the debugger has been activated. And you can highlight over it and it gives you all of these cool details. It tells you the file URL, it tells you everything about it, all of those pieces of interesting code. And if you come down here to the scope, you can see even more details, right? Now, it used to be you could highlight this whole piece and hover, and there you go. So I'm highlighting in the debugger the whole piece, and you can see it's actually giving me the ASDF. Okay, so debugger is there. We've paused it. Click the double arrow to go to the end, or click the step over to call the next function. If you click the next one, there's nothing left to call. All right, so let's just finish it to the end. Okay, so now we've got the value here. Let's assign this value of the element. So we're expecting a number, right? So let's just say var my age, because that's what we're expecting. And we could say if, right? Am I moving too fast for some of you? Okay, y'all let me know. So we have if my age 1, 2, 3. Think about that. Why am I doing that? What am I comparing for?
So that it is for sure a number.
Yeah, I'm for sure checking that my age is going to be a number. And so I'm going to say my age is 18. And if it is, I just want to throw up an alert statement. Magic year. Okay, so I come over here, I'm going to type 18, I click off, debugger is called, oh, I haven't refreshed my page. Yeah, you always got to refresh so that your sources over here have the code. And I'm going to go ahead and put break statements, debugger statements on all of these blocks here. All right, so refresh it, 18, I click off. We're going to use the step over to the next, not the all the way. And my age, is it 18? It jumped out. Now, why would it do that? Well, let's hover over my age. Notice that my age is in quotes, right? This presents a real problem for a lot of developers because they're thinking, well, if all text that comes out of an input on HTML is text, how do you ever do mathematical calculations? What do you do? Well, we have to do something special. We have to convert my age. And we could do it in two places. We could say number hang on, my age all right, JavaScript. You're going to find out how you get answers real quick, okay? JavaScript parse string to number. It's the parse int function. So we have the value that we are accepting and we're parsing it to an int. All right. So let's do it like this. We have parse int like that. All right. Now if we refresh it, type in 18, click off, we have parse int to a number, right? And it did something. Did you see that? Yeah. There's an error though because we have this extra code. I don't know how this extra code got in here. Let me save that. Refresh it again. 18, click off, come down into it now. It is a number, and there's our alert, magic year. All right? What happens if we do this though? 18 alpha. Well, that's not supposed to work, but all right. So we're looking at a basic if condition here, though, right? All right. So let's go ahead and let's add to our logic. I don't want to get caught up in these other details too much. Else alert unmagical year. So I'm going to refresh my code. And 16. It's an unmagical year. It was for me anyways. I didn't get my driver's license till I was 17. Okay, let's go ahead and take it a step further. We've got the if else. Let's go ahead and add a else if. Else if. We're going to say parse int my age 16 pretty cool year. Else alert life is just getting started. Can y'all see that? Okay. All right. So we're going to refresh it. 12. It's going to go down through our debugger. Life is just getting started. All right. Now, if I want to turn off the debugger, really all I got to do is just see, go over to sources, fresh it, unclick the choices there, and the debugger is not turned on anymore. So 12, life is getting started. 14, life is getting started. 21, life is just getting started, right? 18, magical year. 16, pretty cool year, right? So these are demonstrations of using that if else syntax. Let's take it out. Let's make it a little bit better. We're going to use a switch statement. And so the switch statement here is going to parse int my age right there at the start. Use the curly brackets. We're going to say case 0. I don't know. Let's, instead of doing an alert, let's do a console log. Okay. Console log. You know what? Instead of doing that, let's do a document.get element by ID. We'll append the text to the screen. Okay. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to var running log. Okay. And we're going to say, we're going to create a new function because I don't like to keep using these long verbose We'll call it append text. And this is going to take a value. And the value it's going to take there we go. Let's see. Okay. So we have a case, and we're going to call our function here. Append text. And text we're going to append is just a sparkle in my mother's eye. All right. We have a break. Case 1, append text. Lots of fun tasting and touching things. Break. All right, you guys get the idea, okay? I'm not going to go all the way up to how old you are. I'd be typing forever. All right. In our default, we're going to call the append text again, and we're going to say so much fun. All right, got our code. Let's refresh it. I'm going to put in 12. So much fun. I'm going to put in 1. Lots of fun tasting and touching things. 0. Just a sparkle in my mother's eye. Keep clicking in and out, keep clicking in and out, and on it goes, right? Now we could update this because we can see there's a problem here that every time we're doing this, it just keeps adding the text in a way that doesn't make sense. So let's put in quotes, break line, refresh it again, right? And so you can see that we're just appending to it that way. All right, we got a few more things we need to cover here, and then I want to walk through the assignment with you all. Let's go ahead and go back to our lecture here. So those are the JavaScript conditionals. The next type of thing we want to look at is our loops. And loops, they offer a quick and easy way to do things repeatedly. So JavaScript supports many various kinds of loops. There's the for loop, there's the for in loop, which works with objects. There's the for of loop, which works with maps and strings and other things. There's the while loop, and there's the do while loop, okay? And with these loops, the syntax for the very basic JavaScript loop. In fact, this is the same syntax that you would find for most loops in C++, and C, in Java, I think C#. It begins like this. You have a for, and then a statement 1, semicolon statement 2, semicolon statement 3. And then you have the code block. This is the code to be executed. So statement 1 is executed one time before the code block, and that's it. Statement 2 defines a condition to be executed in the code. This is the true or false statement that determines whether it should keep going. And statement 3 is executed every time after the code block has been executed. This is often where we put the incrementer. So I plus plus, so that every time it comes back through, I will increment. So let's look at an example of this basic for loop. We declare a var I, and we have this array: Ford, Dodge, Toyota, Mazda, GMC, Lamborghini, all right? And then we have a for loop. We are saying in our for loop, the initial statement that we're initializing this to be is I is going to equal 0. The statement 2, which is the conditional logic, is do this every time while I is less than the length of cars, which is the number of cars up here. And then statement 3 is after it's ran, incremented. So if we do this, then in our console, it would iterate through this in the log saying Ford, Dodge, Toyota, right? It would iterate through the code block. There's also other things you can do here. For example, in statement 1 goes all the way up through the first semicolon, which means that you can initialize a lot of different variables inside of here. That's legal. It's very possible. So we can say text plus equal cars, I, and a break line, right? That's the basic for loop. Now, when you're looking at we've already gone through that one. That's kind of weird. All right, here we go. So statement 1, it can include a comma separated values to be initialized. Statement 2 is used to evaluate the initial variable, but it's also optional. Statement 2 should evaluate to true or false, okay? If it's true, the loop starts over. If it's false, the loop exits. If you omit statement 2, you must provide a condition to break out of the loop. And you do that by using the break statement that we talked about with the switch condition. So statement 3, it's going to increment the value of the initial variable. Statement 3 is also optional. This means that you have to provide an incrementer somewhere in the code. This could be positive, it could be negative, it could be any number of things. Okay, let's look at the for in loop. So the for in loop loops through properties of an object. So if you remember, this is an object. This is not an array. In an object, we have a label and a value, a label and a value, a label and a value. And labels are something that we'll be seeing in other places as well that you can use. So the way the for in loop would work, it's very easy. It is X in the name of the array, and you basically pass X, and it gives you the value. Very basic use of this for in loop. With the for of loop, this is where you can use things like arrays, strings, node list, and a lot more. So looping over an array, we have var cars, right? We have var x, and we'd say x of cars, x of cars. So here, notice the difference is that we're not having cars bracket x. This is different because objects are handled differently than arrays are with this looping construct. It'd be easy to confuse that, but don't get it too confused. Just remember that when you're using for of loop conditions, you don't provide the bracket for the initial variable. It's automatically already encapsulated in this. The value of x is one of these as you iterate through. So this is using an array, but you can also do it over a string. So for example, if you have var text JavaScript, you could iterate over the letters of the string using the x of principle. And there's a number of different things you could do there for that. Maybe you're searching for a special character in a long piece of text. You can iterate over that text and find a match and do something with it, right? The other type of loop that we have, these are very common. These are called while loops. And these loops loop through code while the condition is true. The syntax is much different than a for loop or a for of or a for in. So basically you have while this is true, execute the code block. And you could even put while true, and it would execute into infinity. It wouldn't stop unless you refresh the browser page or close the browser or something. If you're going to have a condition where this is always true, then you have to have some way to exit out of that code block. All right, so here's a typical example. While I is less than 10, the number is, and it's going to loop through this set of numbers. Notice that the incrementer here is inside the code block. And once I is no longer less than 10, then it will exit out. So if I becomes 10, it'll stop. Then we have the do while loops. The do while loops. Do while loops are very basic. When it comes to a do while loop, what we're really saying is that the code block will execute at least one time. At least one time. And that's important. There are reasons why we may want the code to execute one time before we test the condition. There's always different reasons for why you may want to use these tools. So here in this example, do text. So text could be 0, it could be any number. We're incrementing, and we're saying while I is less than 10. So this number here could be 11. It's still going to increment, still execute this first portion of the block of code at least once. All right, so now we have breaks and continue statements. Breaks and continue statements. A break statement can be used to jump out of a loop. So a break statement breaks out of the loop and continues with the code execution after the loop. Continue statements, they break only one iteration in the loop. So if you meet a condition that you want to just go ahead and jump out of that loop but continue on, this is where you would use the continue statement. Typically, this would be where you're going through a loop, you're executing some code, and you say, you know what, if the number is 5, we're not going to execute this particular sequence. We're going to continue, though, after 5. Right? So here we have an example using a basic for loop. We're saying if I is equivalent in value and type to 3, continue. And so this piece of text here would not be executed in this scenario. It would skip over the rest of the code, go back up, and come back down again through the loop. All right, any questions so far, guys? Any questions?
What if I use an and or an or statement for the for and while loops just to get them out as extra things instead of I++?
So you're saying where I is less than 10 and I is greater than, say, like 5?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, it's very possible. Very possible. You would have to make sure that you put the statement, the least value statement first. So if you're evaluating where I is greater than 3, you'd probably want to put that up front. So it would be in front of this, right after the semicolon here. I don't know if you can see my cursor or not. Can you see it? Probably not. All right. Yeah. All right, so guys, the last thing I want to look at here, and then we have about 10 minutes to work on your homework assignment together. This is called labeled statements. Labeled statements. Okay, so a label provides a statement with an identifier that lets you refer to it elsewhere in your program. You saw labels inside of objects. These are the key and then the value, right? The key is typically a label. A label is used to identify something that you want to mark for use with a break or a continue statement. So the typical syntax is the label and then the statement. Okay. So let's consider this example here. We have let x equal 0, let z equal 0. Then we have the label. Label cancel loops, colon, while true. Console log, x plus 1, z equals 1. While true, console log, z plus 1. If this condition here is met, so we're saying where z is equivalent to 10 and x is equivalent to 10, then break label cancel loop. So that means that we're going to exit not only out of this while loop, but out of that while loop. Now, in this example, we didn't talk about this, but you can nest loops, and that's what we have going on here. We have a while loop, and inside that while loop, we have a second while loop. And that's totally possible. If we said break right here, the only thing that we would break out of is this while loop, and it would go back up to the first. But by saying break label cancel loops, we're saying break out of the entire thing because we've labeled it up here. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So here's the deal with your homework assignment. We're going to walk through this. I have 8 minutes before I have to go. So we're going to Zoom, okay? We're going to Zoom through this. So I need everyone to go ahead and open up your IntelliJ, your Atom browser. And what we're going to do here, we're going to create a new file. You're going to create a index HTML. And in your index HTML, you're going to, let me back up. You're going to create a folder first. Your folder is going to be HW-week12 your last name. Okay? HW-WK12 your last name. Okay? And inside of that, you're going to create an index.html. And once you get there, someone give me a hua. And you're going to populate your HTML. And the next thing you're going to do is inside the body tag of your class, you're going to type form, hit enter. Okay. You're going to create a label in the for. We're going to call this the car name. And inside the label brackets, I'm going to type name of car. Put a colon and a space. After the label, type input. And inside the input, we're going to give an ID. Whoops. And you're going to call this car name. And the name parameter, you're going to call car underscore name. Okay. And then you're going to do a break tag, and underneath that, another input. But you're going to change the type from text to button. And the value of your input is going to be enter. All right. Now, still inside of the input tag, we're going to say on click. Hit enter, quotes, and you're going to type in add display car. And in single quotes inside of the parameter, you're going to say car dash name. Okay. I've got that so far. I'm going to open this up over here. Let's see, open file. Okay, so here's my car, name of car, and there's my name, right? If I click on console and I click enter, it's going to throw an exception because the method add display does not exist yet. So we're going to come down here, going to create the script tag. Oops. And in the script tag, we're going to type function add display car. It's going to take a type of ID for the parameter and just a simple code block. Okay. Right above the script tag, I want you to create a div. And in the div, I want you to give this an ID. And you're going to call the ID list of cars. Okay? All right. So we're going to demonstrate now a couple of pieces of code. Above the function, we're going to say var cars equals empty brackets. Okay? And then we're going to say document get element by ID, passing in the ID, and we're going to use value. And then over here, we're going to say cars dot push equals. Okay. Now, if we go ahead and test this, we could type forward, come over here to our source. I'm going to double click on it, put a breakpoint there on that, and a breakpoint on cars. Okay. And I'm going to click enter. And we can see that we're at the point of assigning. So I'm going to click on that. And if I hover over on cars now, you can see that Ford is added to the list of cars. Okay. So we've added one car. I'm going to refresh it. Okay. Now that we've added the car to it, push is a way of only taking unique values and adding it to the array. We could have done this by saying cars, bracket, index number, assigning it to it. And if you do that, you can have an array filled with nothing but Fords. But we're going to use the push, which basically only allows unique items to be added. Okay, unique array items of cars to be added. So now we want to output the list of cars into our div. So we're going to say var car list equals document dot get element by ID, and we're going to copy the name here. Okay, list of cars, and I'm going to say enter HTML. I want to make sure that you guys pay attention to this. These JavaScript functions are case sensitive, so it has to be exactly as we have them listed here, okay? And then what we're going to do is we're going to say document get element by ID. We're going to grab the same piece of code right here again, but at the end we're going to say plus car list plus, in quotes, a break line. Okay? All right. Now, this little bit of code here has allowed us to add some cars. So we're going to say Ford, hit enter, and nothing happened. It's my oh, that's why. I forgot. Let's take some of this back out. Aye. All right, so var car list. Then we're going to say I think I'm getting ahead of myself, guys. Y'all just be patient with me for a second. Var my car. Then we're going to say cars push my car. There we go. That's the piece I forgot to put on there. Then we're going to have this syntax of var x of cars. Okay. And I'm going to grab the last bit of this code. Okay. So we have var cars of cars. It's going to get one element out of each array and assign it to X. We're going to get the complete car list, assign it to car list over here. Then we're going to say car list plus X with a break symbol at the end. All right, so let's refresh it. Let's try this. Ford, enter. Oh, property can't be null. Let's check it out and see what it's talking about. Ah, that's why. There we go. My IDs don't match. Okay. So we'll do forward, enter, there's forward. We'll type Dodge, there's Dodge. Turn off the debugging here. Enter it again. And you can see it's appending and growing in size. Okay. Now there's other things that we could do to this, but the main thing I wanted to demonstrate for you all is the basics of how to use the for loop. Okay. I want to challenge you with your homework assignment for the rest of the next 30 minutes or so. Come up with a different set of values. See if you can figure out how to eliminate all of these extra duplicates in the list. And that's where we're going to stop tonight. Guys, I will see you on Tuesday next week. And that means we only have one more week until the projects are due. Anyone have any questions for me?
We're good.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
All right. You guys have a good day. I
Later,
will
sir.
chat at you all later.